Hello all, in this part we will be talking about objects. So first I'll also have my ROM manager load in, I just clicked it. So I'm starting from a fresh ROM. If you see me repeating any steps from the previous tutorial, that would be why. So I once again have to do the initial step because it's a new ROM this time. I just have to wait for this to load in. Okay, so this box is now filled in. That means it should be ready for me to mess around. I will do the same thing I did last time. I will choose to replace Bob-omb's Battlefield with my cube. And this is just a setup for showing you about objects. So I will load in the cube again, but to give myself some more room to work around with, I will set this scaling factor to 1,000. So the cube is now 1,000 times larger than it was in the modeling program that I originally exported it from. So I'll hit this convert model to load it in as the area. And now let's go into the editor and check it out again. So I just have to wait for it to load. You may see, wow, that's a lot of gray. It's just big. It was taking up the entire viewport. So, anyways, objects. In the previous tutorial, actually, we already talked about the first object, which is this warp Mario Start 1 thing that naturally appears. I'll just bring it up above the cube again. The camera you can change. It was set to orbit, that's why my object was being followed by the camera. I'll set it back to fly. But let's talk a little bit more about objects. An object is basically anything that isn't the model that you loaded in initially. So this cube, for instance, is what I loaded in. Anything that isn't this cube is going to be an object. And perhaps a better way of explaining it is that an object is anything that Mario can interact with in a more meaningful way than it simply being a wall. So if you can talk to something, if you can collect something, if you can push down a switch, it's safe to assume any of those things are objects. Mario's interacting with them. So, let's add some objects of our own, because we want to collect some stars, let's say. So, the first thing we should do is select one of these empty objects. They're basically a placeholder object that you can put your own object over. So I'll click this one, and then I want to change this one into a star. You can't see the object right now, it's just inside the cube at the center of the level, so I'll bring it up out of that and get it ready to be placed. So, let's set this to be a star. Where do I do that? Right here. So this is where you select your object. I'll hit S to get closer to the star, and I will select star. You can see that the star decided to appear right here where I had my objects selected to. So I'll just move it a little closer to the corner, make sure it's there. Let's see. I'm just digging it into the cube to see where it is. This cube should be textured ideally, but don't worry about that for now. So, that's one star. I want to place another one to prove a point. So I'll move this here and do star. Star. So now we have a second star. I'll bring that up from its initial location again and put it right by the first one. And I just want this one to be on the ground, so I'll hit this drop to nearest button. It drops it to the nearest solid surface, which is my cube. So, you may wonder, why am I selecting object combo? I just called this thing an object, but this is saying it's an object combo. The idea is that it's a combo of what it looks like and what it does. So, either of these stars, you see they will both have the same, or they will have, I believe, the same model ID. Yeah, sorry. They have the same model ID because this is the ID of a star in this game. It's what makes something look like a star. But if we only had this model ID and nothing else, we'd have something that looks like a star just doing nothing. To actually make a collectible, to have it act like a star, you also need a behavior linked to it. And if you select the object combo star, you automatically load in both the model ID and the address for that behavior, just where that behavior is in the code. You don't really have to worry too much about this yet, just That's why it's called object combo, if you're curious. So I have some nice stars to collect. Let's also add in a little bob-omb I can talk to make my level feel a little more lively. So I just select another empty object, another placeholder object, and let's change this one to be a pink bob-omb. Pink bob-omb message. It's I have to drag it back up. I think I may have dragged it too high. Nope, there it is. Let's just put this in another corner so that I can keep everything a little separate here. So I'll drop to nearest, drop it to the surface of this model. So now I have some stars here and a pink bob-omb. Let's see if that does anything interesting for us, shall we? I'll save my ROM. I will save it again before closing ROM manager, just to be safe. And let's launch that. I just have to open my ROM and then we should be good to go. So once again, I'll be selecting a little save file I already had. It just has 3 stars from an earlier version of the game. The save data just carries over. Just heading over to BOB. If you remember, I replaced Bob-omb's battlefield with my own level, so that's why I'm going here. I want to get to my level. And you will see something interesting. Nothing is here. How fascinating. So the reason is that I didn't select it to appear in every act. Let me just... my camera is orbiting, sorry. Forgot it likes to default to that sometimes. Alright, so let me select one of these stars to show you. There we go. Look here. None of these are checked. So what is an act? It's when you go into the level selection screen and it wants you to choose one of the stars to be aiming for. If you were to choose Act 3 in the level selection thing, then the way I have it set up just now is that this star is set to appear when you choose Act 3, but not set to appear when you choose any other act. So I want these things to all appear at every act, so I'll hit all acts, but it's very important that you remember to do this, otherwise your objects will not spawn at all. And you may notice that Act 6 isn't highlighted. It's just a weird quirk of this game, where if all 5 of the first acts are checked to appear, it will appear no matter what, even in Act 6, even if it's unchecked. So it is appearing for all acts. So let's save this again and try again, shall we? So I just cut to this point to save a little bit of time, but let's jump in our painting and look at our new level, which hopefully will have the objects spawned in now. So, as I said, I selected them to appear for every act, so it doesn't matter whether I choose Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. I can choose any of them. I'll just choose Act 3 right now, for no real particular reason. So if I scroll around, I can see both my stars have appeared, though they look like they're already collected, which is a reason I will explain in a second. Let's talk to this pink bob-omb, see if he has anything interesting to say, and you'll notice that no, he has nothing interesting to say at all. It's just the first default stock message. So let's fix both of these problems. One of them being that this guy's a little boring, and the other being that my stars shouldn't be already collected. I want to be able to collect them. So first, I'll collect one of these. I'll collect the second one I placed and see if that gives me any hint as to what's going on. As you can see, it says Big Bob-omb on the Summit is the name of the star I collected. So if I go back to the level selection screen briefly, you'll see that Big Bob-omb on the Summit is the name of the first star. So what happened is that I placed both stars and they just both get treated as the first star of the level I'm replacing, which in this case is Big Bob-omb Battlefield. So let's go and fix these problems. Alright, so I have my ROM loaded again, and you see the area isn't listed because you have to just select a level first, and then it shows you the areas for that level. So now I'll go back into my editor. Okay, so here we are. I'll change the camera mode to let me look around more freely, rather than being restricted to the object that I currently have selected. So let's first focus on making one of these stars not just the default star. So how do I do that? Turns out that a number of objects have a few parameters you can tweak to mostly identify them apart from each other, or do some other little things that it can be nice. Sorry for the wording, but the idea is I can change this behavior param 1 flag for a star, and that's what actually changes which star it is. So if I were to make this 5, this counts as the star that would be in the index 5 for the level that's replacing Bob-omb's battlefield. Because currently this area I'm in is in my Bob-omb's battlefield that I'm replacing, so a star of index 5 in here will be star of index 5 for Bob-omb's battlefield. So also, I wanted to show that I could make this pink Bob-omb say something much more interesting. And how do you do that? Well, ROM Manager. It comes with a little text editor section right here. So if I click this, if you notice index 0, which is what this guy just has by default, this pink Bob-omb, it's the exact text he had. So Bob-omb's just default to index 0. But if you want to have him say a different message, you could index it as something else, once again using that bparam thing. So, a suitably useless message I don't feel like ever using in my ROMHack is this one. I'm not going to have a cold crevice, so I don't really care if I erase this text and replace it with my own, so let me do just that. I will say, hiya, mate. Excellent. So, I have replaced the text at index 40 with hiya, mate. So, anything that goes to index 40 that thinks, oh, I should talk from the message at index 40 will now say hiya, mate. So let me show you what I actually mean. I'll save the ROM again, just usual paranoia. So this pink Bob-omb, it specifically doesn't use bparam1 for this, it uses behavior param 2. So if I change this to 40, now when I talk to this, oops, sorry, I'm clicking all over the place, but now when I talk to this Bob-omb, instead of saying the thing that's naturally at index 0, it will instead decide to choose the text at index 40, which is this text that I replaced. So now it should say the message, hiya, mate. So let's check on both of my changes and see if they worked. So I will save the ROM again, and then load that in. Or load my ROM in my emulator. So here we are. Shady is back once again. So I will just select one of these acts. I'll just select 2 because it's already highlighted. Now if we check out our stars, one of them is lit. That means that it does, in fact, probably mean that this star is the one at index 5. So if I were to briefly... Whoops, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting that escape does that on my computer. If I were to quickly exit the course and go back to the level select screen, you'll see why that one is highlighted. So you'll see that I have the first star and the third star. But if you remember, when I didn't set anything, the star thought it was Big Bob-omb on the summit, because its behavior parameter was just naturally set to 0. And that's because it starts counting from 0. So if I wanted to make something be this third star, shoot to the island in the sky, I would actually give that that star the behavior param of 2, because that would be 0, 1, 2. That's the third index. So anyways, I'll go back into my level. Let's check out if my Bob-omb has anything to say. Looks like that's working correctly too. So I'll collect my star, sorry. And let's see if that was the right star. So that was behind Bob-omb's, behind Chain Chomp's gate. And if we go back in, yep, it starts counting from 0. So when I set the index to 5 in ROM Manager, it became the 6th star in the level I'm replacing. And I replaced Bob-omb Battlefield, so it counts as the 6th star of Bob-omb Battlefield. So there you go. Now let's work on putting enemies in my level. Alright, so now I have my ROM Manager open again. I'll just select my ROM again. And now, as I said, let's add some enemies to my area. I'll add, to start off, a Goomba and a Pokey. A Pokey, in case you can't remember, is the kind of cactus-looking enemy in the desert level of the original game. So let's select some more empty objects. I'll select Goomba with this object. Let's drag it up and put it just to some other corner. And then I'll select a Pokey here. Pokey. There we go. Drop to nearest. There we go. Okay. So I'll save this again, and now my level should have some enemies in it. We'll see whether or not that's true when I load the ROM again. But first, I want to say something else. You probably won't want your levels named Bob-omb Battlefield because, I mean, it's not Bob-omb Battlefield, it's your own level. But you can actually rename all the levels in this game and the names of all the stars. And that's also done in the text editor. So let's edit the name for Bob-omb's Battlefield to be Tutorial Land. And let's change the name of the initial first star. You can see it's an index of 0. Let's change it to just be E. Timely reference. Alright, so let's save and let's launch this and see if all of my changes were enacted correctly. Actually, before I leave, the sharp-eyed viewer might have realized that I actually forgot another step. And that would be that I forgot to actually set the enemies to appear at all X. So let me actually take care of that quickly and then load in the ROM. Let's see, where's the other boy? Here you are. Alright, see you in a second. Alright, back in this room, let's jump into my level. I set everything to appear on all X, so it doesn't matter which one I select. I'll select just one randomly. You'll see that my program has crashed. That's very interesting, isn't it? But there's a very good reason for it. Let me go back to ROM Manager to show you. I'll also load my ROM back in, and then show you the important bit. So, objects, you can't just add them in willy-nilly necessarily. For a lot of objects, there's a special condition you have to meet. And in this case, it's this Pokey that's causing problems for me. Pokey in the slot that I added. So if I go to this area, Object Banks, this is what actually lets me safely put in my Pokey. You see, there's only a few objects in this game that are really loaded in at all times. And a star is one, and Goombas are another, because the original creators of the game wanted to just be able to slap them in any level pretty easily. But outside of some specific things like that, most objects can only be used if their object bank is currently loaded. And this Pokey actually is in an object bank, desert object. So now I just enabled the desert objects object bank, and now I can safely add Pokeys to my level. So most things will be in one of these object banks, and if your level crashes for whatever reason, one of the things to check is just, is my object actually in one of these banks? Do I need to load it in? And if an object is in one of these banks, then if you want to add that object, you will need its bank. Alright, so let's try again and see if it works now. Alright, I'll jump right on in. And let's see if this works. You can see, yeah, my Pokey did load in without crashing the game. The Pokey successfully came in, and hey look, it's my Goomba as well. The Goomba, as I mentioned, isn't actually in an object bank. So you just have to make sure if your object does belong to an object bank that you load that object bank in. So let's check the other changes I made. I believe I already mentioned that this Bob-omb says the custom message I made now. So let's collect the star that I changed. Should be this one. This is the first star of Bob-omb Battlefield, index 0, and you'll see it's just named E as I changed it to be. So I also forgot to point it out earlier, but you'll notice that Bob-omb's Battlefield, the name, changed as well to Tutorial Land. So that's working just great. So just a few more things before I go. If my audio had been on, you would have heard that there just wasn't any music. So you set music on an area by area basis, and music is default just set to be off. So if you want area 1 of your Bob-omb's Battlefield, which area 1 is just the level I loaded in, you can have more than one area. I'll mention that in a future tutorial, but I can change the music there right here. Now, after I select that, if I were to go back to my level, it would be playing Dire Dire Doc's music. So another thing is, you may have been kind of skeeved out a little bit that I was mentioning this bparam stuff, and that's not really an intuitive thing to be able to figure out. Something that can help is if you actually use the program Quad64 to just explore what the game is like normally. Quad64 is a tool mostly for placing and editing objects. You don't have to use it. I'm mostly using it to show you what the original levels are like. But when creating your own levels, you can do it purely in ROM Manager. So anyways, I'll load my ROM to show you just something kind of interesting. If I were to go to select level, inside castle, sorry, where would that be? Here it is. So this is inside of the castle. I'll just zoom in and move around to the Toad here. You can see that he actually uses bparam 1. So you can check any object that you're curious about if you want in Quad64 to see what it's like in the vanilla game, and you can kind of reverse engineer things from there. Though you don't have to use Quad64 for anything. If you only want to just edit and make ROMs, you can stick purely to ROM Manager and be fine. So next tutorial, I will be going over probably either how to make a death plane so that Mario can perish if he falls off of your stage if you'd like. Or I might instead talk about warps and how to warp different places and add multiple areas to your level rather than everything just being within one level. Fairly well.